So, this past week we received the news that the Kane Chronicles adaptation with Netflix will not be going forward. And I am devastated as someone who loves the Kane Chronicles and was excited about this adaptation. But I have a few thoughts as to why it didn't go forward and the future of a Kane Chronicles adaptation. So let's talk about it. So in the same year as the Percy Jackson Disney announcement in 2020, only a couple of months later in fact, we were told that Kane Chronicles were getting film adaptations with Netflix. So this is back in 2020, about 4 years ago now. Well, almost 4 years ago. It would have been this, I think it was like in September of 2020 that we got the announcement for Kane Chronicles, and we got the Percy Jackson one in, July, June sort of period. So they were only a few months apart, which kind of led to the Kane Chronicles announcement being lost in the void of the Percy Jackson joy. But it has been 3 and a bit years since the announcement of Kane Chronicles with Netflix. It was also noted that Disney did have the opportunity to adapt Kane Chronicles as well, but were not interested in the rights of adaptation, which is why it then went to Netflix. Now, in that time, I have covered some of the news here on the channel, but also there has been a page called Kane Chronicles Netflix, now called Kane Chronicles Adaption, or Adaptions, it'll be linked below, have been covering the news to do with this adaptation. So we didn't really get that many updates during that time. We were mentioning that they were looking for script writers, that they were figuring out the process, but we didn't really get much news until around 2022, when we were told about a scriptwriter, who I'll do a cut-in for the name because it is escaping me currently. So I just went back through the Kane Chronicles adaptation page, and it looks like they have had 2 different writers. So there's one who ended up being unnamed, who was the first writer, and then there is Deandra Pendleton Thompson, who in August of 2022 was announced as the scriptwriter and was doing the latest revisions. So it seems like they had one writer who was doing the first draft and did a couple of revisions, and they brought a new person in to either work with them, or maybe Deandra was the main person who was then just going to take what was already there and just fix it up a little bit more. But yeah, so Deandra Pendleton Thompson was one of the named writers for the screenplay, but there was also seemingly another person as well. And the fact that it had gone to the studio execs and they wanted a revision, so there were a draft and a revised script, and then there was also a mention in 2022 about looking for a director. But that was kind of the last time we ever heard news about the Kane Chronicles adaptation, was in 2022. We didn't hear anything again until 2023, when we were told that the script process for Kane Chronicles would not be progressing because of the strike, which, fair enough, support the unions. So that was the last news we had. But the last official news we had about anything to do with the Kane Chronicles adaptation was in August of 2022. And now this is where I'm kind of coming in with where I think the issue of why Netflix have dropped it. Now, Becky has put forward a few options and ideas as to why it may have happened on Threads. I don't have Threads, so I got screenshots as well. And basically the few options are basically studios are cutting down on some new projects as well, so they aren't carrying things forward. It's stuff to do with streaming a little bit as well. And there's also mentioning the fact that Netflix just continuously weren't happy with the script. And I think these are all entirely plausible. Yes, there are a lot of projects that do not get put forward. And in this case, this is also one that took nearly 4 years. We'll say 3.5. That took 3.5 years that had not had much progression beyond a script that still needed work, because they hadn't been able to get a director on board. I know Mythomagic is the name of Rick's production company, but they probably need other production companies involved. So they were still in the very, very early stages of pre-production, and it's just not progressing. In comparison to Percy Jackson, for example, where it was progressing so quickly, well, not so quickly for the industry, Kane Chronicles had no progression. And it's just something that does happen with the industry. But to note for Netflix, there is a situation that In the industry, when rights are bought for a book, and I will preface this now, I only know this information because someone I know is having their book optioned. I don't know if this is the case for everyone or if this is the case for every situation. So if someone knows more, please do correct me in the comments. But the option rights are bought for about 2 years, usually I think is the first round. Then they would renew them for another 2 years. And I think the situation that's happened here is that Netflix renewed the rights in what would have been 2022, where the script was seemingly progressing. They had a script being done. They were seemingly looking for directors at a stage as well that just kind of weren't sticking. But they would be coming up to the 4th year in, I assume, we don't know when they bought the rights. So my guess would be somewhere between April to August is when they would have gotten it for when the announcement happened in 2020. And they just may have been like, it's been nearly 4 years now, there's not been much progression, I don't think we're going to renew the rights. Because what happens when a studio renews the rights, or the person who's bought the option rights renews them, they pay the author a lump sum of money for the rights, basically. And every time you renew it, you continue to do this. Again, correct me if I'm wrong for someone who may know more information about this. So the fact that the script wasn't as strong as they wanted it to be, that they seemingly weren't able to get a director who was interested or involved. Again, this may be that we just weren't told about a director. I believe that we were, I think it comes up on the Kane Chronicles Instagram page, that there was there were discussions and conversations with directors, but nothing kind of seemed to come from it. So I think that just kind of led to, basically there seemed to be a lot of issues with the Kane Chronicles adaptation. And I think there's the additional thing of there was no interest in the adaptation. I think there are a lot of people who were excited for it, but in comparison to the Percy Jackson adaptation, there are still people to this day that when it was announced that it wasn't going forward, there were people saying, I didn't even know this was happening. 3.5 years later, after the announcement of an adaptation, there are still people who did not even know Kane Chronicles was being adapted. Like, I can almost guarantee that on this video we'll have people saying, I didn't know this was happening. And I think that's also the additional problem. Netflix does have a lot of money. They could have continued to renew it. But if they aren't seeing the hype and interest in Kane Chronicles like there was for Percy Jackson, they may not see it as something worthy of continuing to, renew until there is progression with the script and a director and getting further into the pre-production and then the production process. Because if there's no interest from the audience, if there's no rallying around, there was like a whole thing, I think it was back in 2022 actually, where there was like a Twitter hashtag to try and get interest for Netflix, and in comparison there was just not that many tweets that happened for it. There was not much engagement. A lot of it was just like a couple of accounts just using the hashtag really regularly. I think that just kind of shows the issue, is that there was not enough interest, there was not enough knowledge about the adaptation happening, that coupled with the other situations of the script not progressing, Netflix not being happy with it, probably not being able to find a director, the fact that it'd already been 3.5 years and they would be renewing it again for another 2 years to see if something would happen. Like, it would be a second renewal, which does happen, but usually a second renewal of rights. So this would be the third. So they bought the rights, they've renewed the rights most likely in 2022, and this would be the third time of paying out money for the option rights. If they aren't seeing progression, they probably wouldn't renew it. But for the future of the Kane Chronicles adaptation, I think it is possible Disney could maybe pick it up, even though they did have the opportunity before. I don't know where this number came from. Apparently they said no 3 times. I don't know where this information came from, so do not quote me on it. But apparently that was something that was said, allegedly. So I don't know how confident I am that Disney would pick this up. But there is the chance that Kane Chronicles could maybe go somewhere else. it would just then start from scratch. They would not, from what I know, be able to use a script that was done with Netflix. They would have to do one entirely from scratch. Rick even mentions in the announcement, and I have to mention, I was annoyed that the announcement for Kane Chronicles not going forward came from a Goodreads answer. From what I know so far, there is not an official post about Kane Chronicles being, not going forward as an adaptation. It was a Goodreads comment that admittedly was addressed by Becky on Threads afterwards, but there hasn't been an official comment from Rick so far. I'll cut in if I'm incorrect here. But that to me just kind of shows the problem of the Kane Chronicles adaptation. There was not enough interest, there was not enough knowledge. So many of the posts on the Kane Chronicles Instagram updates page were just screenshots of Goodreads comments, nothing like properly official from like Rick's blog post, like what he was doing with the Percy Jackson adaptation. So I think it just kind of, that's going to be the continuing problem, even if Kane Chronicles goes elsewhere, like with Disney. I don't know if it's going to get the same level of attention either way. In comparison to like Magnus Chase, everyone's talking about a Magnus Chase adaptation, which shouldn't happen until after Heroes of Olympus, by the way, because Annabeth needs to be 16 plus and had to have gone through the events of Heroes of Olympus for her character to make sense in Magnus Chase. As well as the fact that Magnus Chase can't really go anywhere but Disney unless they create a new Annabeth Chase character on a different streaming platform. But people keep talking about Magnus Chase and Heroes of Olympus because of the connection to Percy, whereas Kane Chronicles, that is its own thing, is forgotten about entirely. And I think if there isn't enough buzz, if there isn't enough talking about it, like updates from Rick, posting about it, Kane Chronicles in general is probably the most forgotten about series from the Royal Universe. There aren't many quizzes to do with Kane Chronicles. There aren't many, there's not much information to do with Kane Chronicles. A lot of people don't know, a lot of people either haven't read Kane Chronicles or even know about Kane Chronicles. Okay, maybe not a lot of people. Some people. Sorry, that was a bit of a sweeping statement. But I think until more attention is given to the Kane Chronicles book series, an adaptation just isn't going to work well. Because it's not going to have the same level as response from an audience as Percy Jackson or Heroes of Olympus, or even Magnus Chase, for example. Because those have audiences tied to the original series. Kane Chronicles needs to be given its day in the sun as a book series before it can properly work as an adaptation. And so, I'm going to be doing more Kane Chronicles videos here on the channel because Kane Chronicles deserves way more love than it's getting, and I want to be the person who leads to that change. So if you've got any theories to do with the Kane Chronicles books, or just want to talk about what you would have liked for the Kane Chronicles adaptation, let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and if it could be adapted anywhere, how would you like it to be adapted? Where would you like it to be adapted? And what casting choices would you have for some of the characters? Whatever the case, let me know down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. This was a lot of fun to talk about, even if it is a sad subject matter. But Kane Chronicles needs attention before it can be adapted. That's just kind of how I feel it needs to go. So, again, thank you so much. Be sure to subscribe, check out my Patreon, check out my books. And again, thank you. And I'll see you all next time.